to everyone who joined us today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings of the creator of everything that exists be on each and every single one of you. We appreciate all of you taking time out of your Saturday afternoon to join us for the special live stream. Really on an important discussion that in today's day and time with secularism and discussion about really everything except God, we want to be able to create a safe space, as so many safe spaces exist for so many different topics, whether it be political or with relation to gender identity. We want to create a safe space for theological discussion, for talking about God. And because we don't have very many safe spaces for that, it becomes incumbent upon us, whether you believe in a higher power or not, to try to fashion the means where we can talk about the Creator, where we can talk about God. So today, that's actually what we're going to be discussing. And for everyone present, once again, we really do appreciate you all taking the time to join us for this topic. Um, First off, I want you guys to see the comment section below. I want you to be able to actually interact with me through the comments. I know it's not really conventional for someone on a live stream to say something and then like you respond in the comments like that. But for the sake of actually having a discussion, I do want you all to use this chat so that we can all talk together. So if you're with me so far, just send a one in the chat. In the comment section. Sure. Okay. I'm first gonna kind of start by talking about the philosophical belief systems that are contrary to belief in God, and specifically a creator, a higher power. And the origin of those two historically are found in Greco-Roman philosophies. The first is called atheism, and the second is called agnosticism. And some of you all have heard of these terms before. Some of you may have never heard of them before, or at least maybe you've heard of it, but not from an academic perspective. So atheism actually comes from the Latin word atheos, right? And atheos, it began as philosophical scrutiny of the fact that there is a higher power. That's how it started. This philosophical scrutiny came in the form of cynicism. The earliest philosopher to have had this discussion was alive around 6 BCE. 6 BCE. And that philosopher's name was Xenophanes. 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 And so this early form of skepticism on the concept of a higher power started with Xenophanes asking a question. If cows had hands and they were able to, with their own intellect, create gods, what would their God look like? Well, he said that cows would make cow gods. And just like how the Romans of that time had Jupiter and the Greeks of that time had Zeus, he said that the cows would just have a cow version of Zeus and the cows would just have a cow version of Jupiter. And so this eventually evolved from this theological skepticism or scrutiny of, well, God is just whatever the intellectual power is able to create. That evolved from just kind of questioning the Mount Olympus version of the gods back then, and that's belief in polytheism that eventually translated to social critique, to then questioning how theology stands up to what is referred to as scientific determinism. Scientific determinism. And then from there, if you've ever heard of Epicurean ethical pursuits, it then moved from this idea of questioning what God is like and are we only making God in God's image because we can, from Xenophanes, to then the social critique of comparing theology to science, right? To then making it less about what the nature of God is and what role God plays in our life in the form of ataraxia, Ataraxia, ataraxia. And ataraxia is essentially belief in trying to attain a state free of emotional duress. So not just being happy, but being stress free. That from this state, it then began to become integrated into determinism with time. It was fused with what was known as infinitism, believing in the infinite interconnections of everything, with nihilism, that everything is essentially moving towards nothing. And that conclusion over centuries eventually became life has no purpose beyond life itself. So that's kind of like in 4 minutes or less, the origin and evolution of atheistic thinking. Now you couple that with the idea of belief in science versus belief in God, which is a newer thing, right? Either you believe in scientific determinism or you believe in creationism, that a creator created everything and that the answer at the end of every single question is either science or God. Science is working to solve those questions and to figure out how everything works, or the answer to every single question that does not have an immediate answer is God. But that is the conclusion that we've reached in atheistic thinking. Specifically, that life has no purpose beyond life itself, right? Agnosticism historically is a little bit different. It's a little bit different. And while historically it can be agnosticism, which comes from the combination of the Latin words a and gnosis. A here being a prefix that means no or not or without, and gnosis meaning thinking. So with or rather knowing. So a gnosis means not knowing, like you cannot know. So agnosticism in a nutshell is that you cannot 100% know God except through empirical experiences. Like if something miraculous happens in my life, then that can be a sign that indeed God is real. But without the experience, there's no way for me to actually know God. And there's a far more nuanced discussion to be had about agnosticism, but that is just it in a nutshell, given everything else that we're planning to cover today. So, agnosticism as a thought process on if there is a creator or not, historically, it can be found in all Greco Roman philosophies. Can be found in every single form of philosophy because the idea of not being able to know something 100% was very much a key feature of Greco-Roman philosophies, not speaking definitively about something. And I keep making reference to Greco-Roman philosophies because it has played a huge level of influence on westernized thinking. So from kind of having this idea of not knowing, it was further elucidated through what's known as existentialistic ethics. I exist. I'm a person. I'm a human being. My life has values, but how does that make itself manifest in morality? This is where you get concepts like human rights. This is where you get concepts like liberal and conservative political thinking. And so instead of mixing these two and saying that they all come together, well, rather we say that, well, I know this to be true based on my experience. I know this to be true based on what I've seen, what I've learned, what I've heard, what I've experienced. So now you can see that agnosticism kind of furthered this idea of really subjective belief in God. And the goal of this was what's known as apatheia. Apatheia, reaching a place of not being so emotionally invested in one thing or the other that it makes it hard for you to see the bigger picture. And now we can see that the overlap of all of those things have made itself manifest in what is in our time hedonistic lifestyles. I'm not going to say that God is going to judge me. I'm not going to say that God can tell me what to do or what not to do. Rather, I'm living my life to experience as much as possible, to be happy, to have as much pleasure as possible. And at the end of the day, YOLO, you only live once. So now all of life kind of gets filtered through the lens of an atheistic thinking of God. And this is counter to the idea of there being a creator. Atheistic thinking, which is at its conclusion, life has no purpose beyond life itself. So you need to live a life that's stress free, that's free of emotional duress. Or agnostic thought processes of, well, I need to maximize my pleasure, and pleasure varies from person to person. I need to maximize my happiness, and happiness varies from person to person. So I only live once, so I need to do everything I can to make myself as happy as possible. And finding God along the way is a part of that journey. So these are kind of the two primary arguments for why people may not believe in a creator. And whether it's a scientific outlook or evolutionary theory, or we all came from monkeys, or whatever you may think, or all organized religion is just the opium for the masses. It's just, religion is not, the best way of knowing God because it's all subjective. These all end up inevitably tracking back to atheistic thought processes or agnostic thought processes, right? Now, those are the two primary arguments for not being able to affirm if there's God. But as far as what is used to affirm if there is God, typically you have ontology, ontological arguments for God existence, which is God is greater than that which can be conceived. So if I want to think about God, I need to know whatever I think God is, and this is the ontological argument. The minute I think I know what God is, God would have to be greater than that, because the definition of God is greater than what you can even think of, or imagine, or conceive, intellectually, emotionally, or otherwise. Another argument for God's existence is the cosmological argument. And many people have heard this. It's cause and effect. If every effect has an initial cause, then what would cause the effect that is the universe? Very simply put, if we have a universe, what could make it besides God? So God would be what caused the universe to come into existence. Very summarized and shortened version of it, but this is the cosmological argument for God's existence in a nutshell. Another argument that people use for a creator, for there being a God, is the teleological argument. Whenever you look at everything in the creation, you notice that it has a design. Cell phones didn't come out of nowhere. Someone had to make it. And it's designed, it has a specific function, a purpose. If this is what human beings could come up with, then how much more so for the entire universe? The design that you see in the universe is a testament that there was a designer, and that designer would be God. Whether it's an atheistic outlook, an agnostic outlook, or a theistic outlook, these are different things that people say when it comes to arguing for a creator. But whenever you think about, okay, what are some of the root reasons that people defer to for why they don't believe in God? They don't believe in a creator of the universe. Well, the first is arguments of evil. If God is all powerful, then why would God let evil exist? Or even chaos. Everything is moving towards entropy. Everything we see in the universe is falling apart. It's all everything is moving towards its own destruction. Eventually, even the universe would no longer exist the way that it does. If an all-powerful, all-merciful being exists, then why? Why would God let things be the way that they are? Whether it be on a universal scale or even between human beings. If God is real, then why would God let us suffer? And then you also have fatalism. Anytime anyone sees something bad happening, if you attribute it to God, then it's very easy to question, okay, well, why would God let that be? Some people do also use the argument of science to argue against the nature of God existing in the first place. There's a phrase, I don't agree with it, but it's something that is said. Evolution is suicide, because eventually everything that you know, that you love, that you see, will die, or it will fade away. So between the idea of there being an actual creator, or something that people can look to and see as God, or that they don't believe in it at all. I would then challenge you to ask yourself, whether you are a Muslim, a Christian, an atheist, what is it that defines an authority on knowledge? Who can speak definitively about if there is a creator or not? Who has that authority? And what are you using as that authority? Are you using science as that authority? Are you using the Bible as that authority? Are you using the Quran as that authority? Are you using your own thoughts and feelings as that authority? And if so, well, what gives it that authority in the first place? Are you saying that science is like the supreme authority on all things related to knowledge? Are you saying the Bible is that? Are you saying your emotions are that? Are you saying the Quran is that? And if you're defining that as the authority, well, based on what? What proof do you have to say a creator exists based on these things, or a creator does not exist based on these things? Another question that I would ask you, so that we're not finding ourselves whenever we have these spiritual discussions, because as we mentioned in the beginning, there are safe spaces for a lot of things. There are safe spaces for political debate. There are safe spaces for discussions on gender fluidity, on sexuality, but there's not very many safe spaces for discussions on spirituality, on discussing the differences in faith and if God is real or if God is not real. Does the interpersonal deductions that you make on if there is God or if there is not God, do they have universal ramifications? Meaning, are there consequences to me believing in God or not believing in God? Another question I would challenge you to ask yourself, regardless of your current faith system now, is what is the criteria for distinguishing between your personal belief, right? Your actual personal belief, and 5 things. Is there a creator or no? Does life have a purpose or not? Is there any significance to death or not? And not just attainment of the truth, right? How do you know if something is completely true or not? But also, what happens to you when you die? What is the concept of the afterlife? Does it exist or not? Whenever we begin to ask ourselves these questions and we put ourselves in a position where we can have these discussions, it will become very, very clear what is a subjective argument and what is an objective one. I'm going to ask you all a question to the people who are here, and I just want you to just give me an answer. You can take your time typing it. I'll give maybe like a couple of minutes, but I just want to hear from you. And it's an odd question, but just take your time and really think about it. What is a chair? What is a chair? It's a serious question. I'm not being rhetorical at all. Maybe take the time in the comment section and just type, what is a chair? Now, some of you may go to Google and you may actually look up an answer. I prefer that you actually say the first thing that comes to your mind, that you type out the first thing that comes to your mind when I ask you, what is a chair? So again, we're just going to give you a couple of minutes here. Type it out. What is a chair? What is a chair? Something to be sat on. Something to be sat on. Okay, thank you for sharing that answer, Cody. If I sit on a table, am I sitting on a chair? If I sit on the floor, am I sitting on a chair? Something to sit on. Thank you for sharing that answer, Ahmed. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Furniture to sit on, a utility. Okay. What's the difference between sitting on a table, sitting on a floor, sitting up against a wall? None of those things are chairs. What is a chair? Now, by your definitions that I'm looking at, furniture to sit on, a utility, or if I sit on the counter, I'm not sitting on a chair. Just because you're on the floor or table, you aren't using it correctly. But you said it's something to be sat on. So if I sit on a person, am I sitting on a chair? Does anything I sit on automatically become a chair? Or is a chair something else? So, what is a chair? Now, do you want me to Google it for you or do you want to Google it yourselves? It's funny. We use chairs all the time. I'm sitting in a chair right now, or am I? What is a chair? Whenever you get in a car, what are you sitting on? Are you sitting on a chair? Or is it a car seat? What's the difference between a seat and a chair? Are they both the same thing? Is a chair a subjective item? Is a chair whatever I think it is? Is a chair whatever I believe a chair is? So tell me, brothers and sisters, what is a chair? We'll give you one more minute. Send an answer to what a chair is. Something you sit on usually has 4 legs and a back. So if I sit on a horse with a saddle that has a back on it, am I now sitting on a chair? Has my horse suddenly become a chair if the saddle has a back added to it? Maybe not. I'm going to actually read to you all what the definition of a chair is. A chair is a chair regardless if you sit on or throw it at someone. Well, okay, I guess that's fair too. I'm going to read to you the definition of a chair. It's a piece of furniture for one person to sit on, having a back, and usually 4 legs. Usually, right? Has legs, it's inanimate, and you sit on it. That's what Brother Ahmed had sent. Accurate, right? And chairs, it's funny because I said, what is a chair? And no one thought. A chair is a seat of authority. A chair is a position, right? Of a player, of an instrument for a symphony and orchestra. You know, if any of you grew up and played the violin or cello or the viola, you have first chair, second chair, third chair, right? A person who presides over a meeting can also be a chairperson, chairwoman, chairman, right? A chair can also be in British dialect, it can carry a person aloft in a public triumph. So you can put someone on a chair. In professorship is also the definition of a chair in British dialect. To preside over something as a verb, a chair is to preside over a meeting. So I just mentioned 9 different definitions of the word chair. But in any of those cases, it's important to make sure that you distinguish what the definition is that you're referring to. Otherwise, you're going to take something simple and you're going to convolute it and confuse it with many, many different things. Now, look at the amount of brain power and comments that went into just talking about what a chair is compared to God. You can't take something like a chair and reduce it to being something subjective, right? So how about whenever we talk about God? Is God Buddha? Is God Jesus? Is God inside of you? Is God everywhere? Is God in the creation? Is God beyond the creation? Whenever we started talking about a chair, we started talking about like the nuance of it, the specifics of it, what makes this a chair versus that a chair, the difference between a horse in the chair, the floor in the chair, different types of furniture in a chair. You would never confuse a sofa with a chair or a bar stool with a chair. A computer chair is not like a rocking chair. It's not like a throne, which is also a type of chair. You don't confuse any of those things because you're very, very specific in those meanings. So can we just say God is anything or everything or what I think God is? No. You have to be able to go to a source, an authority on it. Now, the difference between God and a chair is we can look at different chairs around us in rooms and how we utilize them. But for God, Where are you going to go to find the definition of what God is, who God is, what God does? So now we begin to ask ourselves, who is God and what is God? Why does there need to be a God? Does there need to be a God? What would be the authority of what God is? Is it all the same? As long as you believe in a higher power, is it all the same? If you call it Jesus, if you call it Yeshua, if you call it Yahweh or Yavivave or Allah, is it all the same? Is it? Now, it's very easy to quickly just say no. No, it's not all the same. It's very easy to jump to that conclusion and to say it. But it's much harder to be able to sit with a group of people and to have a discussion on it. So when we say God, right, it's funny how the discussion can become very muddy. Because just because I say God, it does not necessarily mean that I'm referring to the creator. When I say creator, am I talking about the one who created Adam and Eve? Is that the same thing as what created the universe? Is that the same thing that gave life to human beings? Is that the same thing if you believe in a soul? Is it the same thing that gave us that? You see, whenever we begin to have conversations about God, there's an inner contrarian that you have to address. What do I want God to be versus what God actually is? How could I determine the facts of what God is versus the fiction of what God is? And on the smallest scale to the biggest scale, how am I defining the creator of everything that exists? It can be kind of hard to have these discussions, right? But that's the reason why we wanted to create this space to actually talk about the creator, to actually be able to say, no, is there a God? Yes or no? How do I know who God is? And for the sake of time and really out of respect to each and every single one of you, I want you all to know very, very clearly that this is not just a one-time discussion with an immediate answer. No, we need to create dialogue about the creator. Healthy, wholesome, engaging dialogue about the creator. And be able to meet each other where we're at in that journey as a Muslim, as a Christian, as an atheist, as an agnostic, from Hindus to people who practice Shinto and everyone in between. We need to be able to have healthy, wholesome dialogue and discussion about all of that together. If we can't, then unfortunately, we're going to keep running into the same issues again and again and again and again, where people make it seem like if you practice a religion or if you believe in God, then you're backwards or inclined towards violence, or be able to perpetuate a lot of misunderstandings about people who believe in God and people who practice a faith based on God Almighty. So we plan on having these discussions monthly. And for those of you who are present, if you really enjoyed this dialogue, just an introduction to conversation about the creator, then I really strongly encourage you to invite your peers, whether they're Muslims, non-Muslims, Christians, atheists, whatever. Invite them so that we can actually have these dialogues. Now, Facebook Live formats is one thing, a Zoom is another, and we're going to try some different formats so that we can engage people in many different ways when it comes to this discussion. But we just want to at least begin by talking about what it means to know the creator. So we'll just conclude with this point. While I talked about atheism, agnosticism, I touched on ontological, teleological, cosmological arguments for God's existence, and kind of just questioning aloud for myself and for those of you present, what does it mean to know God? And where am I going to get that information from? And what defines the authority on that? Is it something that I make up? Is it something that I get from somewhere? I want all of us, whether you already have a faith system or whether you don't really know what to believe in, whether you're a new Muslim or born Muslim or anything in between, I want you to just begin by asking yourself, who is God and how do I know God? Through my faith system. If I don't know God at all, where do I begin? And for those of you who already have faith, maybe begin by peacefully kindly and openly putting these same questions forward to others as well. I think in this time that we live in, this is one of the most critical discussions that we should all be having with ourselves, with our family, with our friends, and begin to reconcile those differences and call people to a higher standard of what it means to believe in God Almighty. So, I appreciate all of you all taking the time to join us today. And just keep an eye out for future information. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, and our YouTube channel as we begin to post more things like this and to have more nuanced and in-depth discussion on what it means to know God. And thank you once again for coming. Jazakumullahu khairan. May God reward each and every single one of you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings of God Almighty be upon each and every single one of you.